Hello students, in this module we will be doing the fourth poem of your syllabus in English literature, and that is After Blenheim. Now After Blenheim was written by Robert Southey, and we can very well imagine that he himself belonged to that field. That is why it was very easy for him to correlate to the hardships of the war and what were the outcomes of the war and battle, and that is what he has mentioned profoundly in this particular poem, or we can say he has tried to build a particular scene where he can teach his audience that war battles are of no use. We can say, first of all, let's talk about Robert Southey. So Robert Southey was born in 1774 and died in 1843. He was one of those poets who are well known for their romantic movements in English literature. Romanticism over here does not mean anything which is related to love. It is something which is related to imagination and taking the whole imagination to a next level. Now we can say that in this, William Wordsworth was the pioneer, and he has tried to equal him in using his words and the way he has brought out his matter and his scene in this particular poem. The poem of the son of a draper, he received his education from the Westminster School, and that was Balliol College, and his meetings with St. Coleridge developed into a friendship. He also developed a lot of taste for literature, poetry, and other such literary works. He wrote a huge number of poems, plays. Along with that, many of the letters and biographies were also written by him. Next, we see, which you can also mention in some of your poems also, in your answers also about him, that he has written some of the short poems which are like The Scholar, The Battle of Blenheim, The Inchcape Rock, which are some of the very famous poems of Robert Southey, and they are even Inchcape Rock was earlier in the syllabus also. So these are some of the poems which tell a lot about the scenario that he wants to develop, and they are some or the other way we can say these are the poems which tell a lot about the human nature and something that you do bad and what are the repercussions or results of those things, your actions, that have been the prime you can say themes of his poems. Next we see about this poem, we can talk about the title of the poem and along with the various other things, the themes of the poem. So here we see the theme of the poem. First of all is horrors of the war. Now here poet has tried to bring out very clearly through this poem that it is in After Blenheim, what are the main repercussions and what are the things which come after the war. During the war there are obviously atrocities and murder and killing, all those things, but what happens after the war is also something which is quite you can say should be brought under the notice of the common people, that it is the wars which are not going to end within a year or few, but rather their effects, they remain or they keep on hovering around for a long period of time. Here we see After Blenheim uses an ironic structure to bring home the idea that war is horrible. And what is that ironic structure? That every time when to the old man there his grandchildren ask about the particular what most famous after war of Blenheim, he has no particular clues, no particular information about about that war, but only thing he knows that is it was a famous victory, it was a big victory, it was something which was a glorious victory. But what was big, what was famous, what was glorious about it, he hardly knows about it, and he cannot satisfy his grandchildren with any of the excuses. He simply says that many people lost their lives, many innocent people died, yet it is a part of a famous victory, a big victory. But how can it be a part, or how can then victory be called a great or a good or a famous victory? That is beyond his explanation, beyond him, and he cannot explain all those things to his children. Here we see ordinary soldiers lay down their lives, war heroes are praised, victories are extolled. This is what happened in the war fought at Blenheim in 1704 also. Now the English registered a grand victory over the French. The old man, who's named over here as Caspar, describes the battle as a famous victory. That is, he is describing this particular victory to his grandchildren. His response towards the war is conventional. That means something which has been told to him for ages. He is just reciting the same old thing about the war, that it was great, it was famous. How it was, that is something which is not known to him. Only his grandchildren fail to understand how a destructive and a very evil thing like this war can be praised and hailed like something glorious, something grand, something famous. They are not able to understand that their grandfather is saying it was a famous victory. How can it be a famous victory? It was a grand victory. How can it be a grand victory when there was so much of killing and death and destruction in this particular victory? What was the grand or the famous or the good thing that came out of this war? The old man has no reply for his kids, grandchildren's innocent questions, and that is something which leads us with a question, that are the wars really a solution for any of the problem? What are the repercussions? What are the after effects of the war? That is also something which has to be kept into consideration whenever person or people talk about solving a thing with a war. So we can say this is probably one of the themes of the poem. The another theme of the poem is the generation gap that has been clearly shown through this particular poem, and that is the generation gap between Caspar and his grandchildren. It would have been shown as a man sitting with his children, but then the generation gap would not have been that big. But over here, the generation gap is between young minds who are not even hardly 10 years plus, whereas the other person is almost 70 plus. So the difference is huge, and that shows the big difference in the mindset and the way thinking and taking away up of the things also in the various generations. We see another theme of that the poem seems to project is the difference between the view of point, or you can say point of views, of old and the new generation. The old men like Caspar have no fresh thinking about almost everything. They just think whatever they have been told to them for ages. They are conventional and undaring. They don't want to question the things which they have been told since from the ages, that they are like that. Why they are like that? They don't have any zeal or any enthusiasm to raise questions to that. But on the other hand, children, they have their responses to all the things are like simple and instinctive. They want to question everything. The two children in the poem have different kinds of thinking. They do not understand how their old grandfather could praise a war like this, so destructive, and call it famous or something very very grand. So that is what they keep on questioning him, how can it be a famous or a grand victory? The poem has an open ending. The old man continues to stick to his conventional opinion about the war, that such grand victories or such grand wars, they do have such kind of things, events as a part of it. But he is not able to still satisfy the zeal and you can say the important questions of his grandchildren. He has no reply to the searching questions of his little grandchildren. So that shows the difference between the age group, the generations, and their outlook towards the certain problems that come their way. So here we see these are basically the important themes of this poem. Next, we move on to the next part, that is the title of the poem. The title of the poem over here is quite apt. How can we say that? Because in order to understand the real importance of, one has to have the historical background of the war fought between England and the French at a small village called Blenheim, and this war took place in 1704. The English who fought and won the battle were assisted by the Austrians and Bavarians. The English fought under the command of the Duke of Marlborough. So Blenheim in the poem comes to refer to this battle between the English and the French, as the poet depicts a scene several years later after the battle was fought here. The title is appropriate as it says after Blenheim. That means after the war that took place in Blenheim, what are the things that are still hovering over there? Like in the poem, we can say still the skulls and bones keep coming out from the ground when they plow the field, because for a long period of time those fields had been the open burial grounds for those dead bodies which kept lying over there. And now, as during the course of time these bodies did bury in the ground, yet they keep on coming out the bones every now and then. That means somebody gave a ultimate sacrifice of their life for the nation. But Now today they don't even have a proper burial ground. They lay dead over there. Nobody was there to pay attention to their dead bodies. And after so many years, one can easily find out the bones of certain particular person who must have been some innocent fellow who died just for the sake of his nation. And this is the same skull out of these bones and remains. This is the same particular part of a body skull that Casper's grandchild brought over here, and he is asking questions regarding that particular skull. They don't even know who this person is, but he had laid his life for the nation. So that is the important message the poet wants to give, that one can give their ultimate sacrifice, yet during a war nobody pays attention to who has been killed, where his dead body lay, and what has happened to that particular person. Did he get a proper burial or not? Nothing is clear to that particular incident or to that particular great victory, and still they always term it as a great victory. So that is something which poet wants to bring, the harsh reality of the war and the after effects of the war. And that is why this title is apt over here, because it talks about the Blenheim village where this war took place, but it is the scene many years much later after that particular victory. Here, one of the important thing that you need to tell about this poem is it is an anti-war poem. It is talking about Blenheim, the war, the victory, the dead bodies, the skulls, but in every particular line you might feel that the poet is not trying to, you can say, glorify the event or talk about the famous victory. Rather, through the medium of those children, he is just trying to ask questions. What is the use of this particular war? What was the benefit of this war? What was the advantage of this war? How was this war so desperately required? And what good came out of those wars, that war? And ultimately it is basically he's raising a question about the use of the, or how, why should one take up to war. Basically wars are futile and they are useless. They are not supposedly considered to be the main, you can say, way of solving a particular problem, resolving anything. So that is what the poet has been questioning over here again and again throughout the poem, through the medium of the grandchildren. Next, we talk about the style of the poem. After Blenheim is particularly a very lyrical poem, and it can be termed as a ballet. It is a simple tale involving a conversation between an old man and his grandchildren, and in a very innocent way they are asking questions regarding that particular event which they eagerly want to know about. And the old man is, you can say, running short of the explanations. He cannot give proper explanations to most of their questions. And this is something which has been very nicely depicted over here, that the old man has his own concepts about the poem, about the war, and he cannot think or give an explanation beyond that what he has been told, since from his you can say childhood he has seen that particular event. So since his childhood till now he has been heard certain things about the war, and he can only quote or cite the same remarks. He does not know what to tell more about the poem, and that is why he fails to give a proper explanation why this war was a great war or a important war. Here we see the poem has 11 stanzas, as it is a ballet, so it's a long poem. So it has 11 stanzas, and each stanza has 6 lines and incorporates a particular quatrain and a couplet. That means 4 lines are in a proper rhyme, and then 2 are in a you can say rhyming with each other. So it is 4 plus 2 lines. That is how the entire paragraph has been set up. The quatrain has the rhymic scheme of A, B, C, B. That means the first line matches with the last word, matches with the third line last word, and then second line and the fourth line, they match each other. Or rather, you can say first and third line, the last words are totally different, and second and fourth line matches with each other, and then fifth and sixth line, the last word matches with each other. So you can say, call it as a rhymic meter of A, B, C, B and D, D. That means A, first and third line, they don't match. It is the second and fourth, fifth and sixth. Lastly, we move on to the explanation of this poem. Now, without wasting any further time, let's quickly take up the explanation of the poem. It says, the first stanza. It was a summer evening. Old Casper's work was done, and he, before his cottage door, was sitting in the sun. And by him, sported on the green, his little grandchild, Wilhelmine. Now here it was summer evening, and as the summer evening was hot or warm enough, old Caspar was tired throughout the day's work. After his day's work was done, then he gradually tired, he came to his doorstep. And there at near his cottage door, it is not mentioned he went inside, he sat before the cottage door, and while sitting over there, he was just sitting in the sun, resting for a while. At that time, he is watching his granddaughter, that is Wilhelmine, and it was she playing over there in the green. That means the green patch of grass or a ground or a lawn. There she is busy playing with her own particular ways or toys or things. She is busy playing in her own particular imaginary world, you can say. So it is green and Wilhelmine, and then first was evening, and third word, third line, last word, door. They don't match, but it is second and fourth, done and sun. So that is the rhyming scheme we were talking about. So old Caspar, after his day's work, sat near his door, near his cottage door, and there from the from the entrance, from the threshold, he is just looking at his grandchild. She is sitting there and playing in the lawn. She saw her brother Peterkin roll something large and round, which he beside the rivulet in playing there had found. Rivulet is a small stream of river. He came to ask what he had found that was so large and smooth and round. So Wilhelmine was playing over there when suddenly she saw her brother Peterkin has come from his from the ground over there where he was playing near the rivulet, near the river stream, and there he was playing and coming with a particular large piece of something which was round, large, and it was white, and he had found it near the rivulet, and he had come he was rolling it down in the ground, and that is why he came over here bringing it to his grandfather, because he did not know what it was and he wanted to know what it was from his grandfather. He knew that by all means his grandfather must be knowing what this particular thing is that he is bringing, which is large and smooth and round, and it is like a ball but not a ball. Old Caspar took it from the boy, who stood expectant by, and then the old man shook his head, and with a natural sigh, "'Tis some poor fellow's skull," said he, "who fell in the great victory." He took that skull from that object from the boy, and when he looked at it, the boy was expectantly looking at his grandfather because he wanted to know what is the thing, what is the grandfather going to tell him about this object. And the grandfather looked at it and had a deep sigh, a deep breath, and that was of sorrow, and he simply said, "Oh, it belongs to some poor fellow. It is the head, the skull of a poor fellow who must have died when he fought in that great victory, in that particular war, which was a great victory, and that is after Blenheim, or the victory, the battle of Blenheim." Now these children, as they came to know about the Blenheim war, they said, "I find them in the garden, for there's many here about, and often when I go to plough, the ploughshare turns them out. For many thousand men," said he, "were slain in that great victory." He says, "Every now and then when I go to plough the field, I do fight them, because in my ploughshare, the instrument through which I plough the field, on through that they come out, they are excavated, they come out of the ground, and there are many of them. So every now and then they keep coming out. There were thousands of men who died over there, who were slain in that great victory, and that is why every now and then when I go to that particular village, that to my land, to my farm, to work over there, I usually come across these particular not these skulls only, but any part of bone skull, they keep coming out from the ground, and I keep excavating them, because these were the bones of those people, those who died in that particular great victory." Next we see, "Now tell us what it was all about." Young Peterkin, he cries, and little Wilhelmine looks up with wonder-waiting eyes. "Now tell us all about the war, and what they fought each other for." So here both the grandchildren are excited and they want to know about this particular war. So young Peterkin, he cries out, "Now tell us what is it all about." And at the same time, Wilhelmine is not shouting, but she is eagerly waiting that whatever the grandfather will tell, she will also like to listen to it, and that is why she is waiting eagerly for the explanation. So both the children are eagerly waiting to know what the war is all about, what their grandfather has to tell them about that particular war. He says, "It was the English," Caspar cried, "who put the French to rout. But what they fought each other for, I could not well make out. But everybody said," quoth he, "that it was a famous victory." So here he's saying it was the English under Duke Marlborough. They, along with Austrian and barbarians, they came over here and they fought against the French in the particular village of Blenheim. And when they fought each other, it was known that they were fighting. It is a great victory or big fight, war. But what was the main reason for that particular war? Nobody knows about that particular topic. So I have only heard people saying that it was, as he quote, it was a famous victory. But this famous victory, what was it fought for? Nobody has any clues of that particular incident. Then the person says, "My father lived at Blenheim then, yon little stream hard by. They burned his dwelling to the ground, and he was forced to fly. So with his wife and child he fled, nor had he where to rest his head." Now, ironically, the old man has no clues about this particular war, but he himself was a victim of this war, because he says just near the river at Blenheim, "It was my house," and his father, that means grandfather, Caspar's father, so it is the great grandfather of the two young children, he was there, he lived over there, and at the night time people came and they burned his dwelling there, his house. So he was forced to run away from there. At that time, even at night time only, by some means, he along with his wife and a young child had to leave the house and run away. And they ran away in such a hurry that they had nothing to with them and no place for them to take rest and take a shelter for themselves. This shows that old grandfather himself was the victim, yet he has no clues what is the particular war fought for. That is very, very, you can say, ironical. He is still being a victim. He's saying it was a great victory or it was a famous victory just because people say that, and he has never thought more than what people tell him. He has never tried to question that particular quote. He says, "With fire and sword the country round was wasted far and wide, and many a childing mother then and newborn baby died. But things like that, you know, must be at every famous victory." So here he says throughout the country people were having this particular scenario very common. People were killed and they were firing and then fires and everything. It was swords and killing, mass destruction everywhere. Huge pieces of land turned out into wasteland. Why? Because the dead bodies lay over there. Wherever such dead bodies of the war lie, a huge number of dead bodies and blood and everything, usually those areas become quite wasteland, because you cannot do irrigation or agriculture or any particular thing over there for a long period of time. It turns out to be good enough to use only after several decades. So here he's saying that that entire land, huge pieces of land, turned out to be wastelands. And along with that, not only this was the destruction, the death and destruction followed over there as the killing of the innocent ladies who were childing mothers. That means they had young children and they had to look after them, so even they were also sacrificed. They also died. Not only these women, but their babies who were newborn babies, young children, even they were killed in that battle. And this is something he has no particular explanation how after all this brutality also he can say it as a grand victory. He simply says, because everyone else has been saying it, that these are all the parts. Usually such kind of deaths are like the sacrifices which are offered in such kind of great victories. They are part and parcel of the victory of the such grand victories, and that is the only you can say consoling sentence he has for himself and for all those people, those who lost their life in that particular victory, in that particular war. Next he says, then say, or you can say the children now are quite eager to know how can this be a great victory when such destruction has taken place. They say it was a shocking sight after the field was won, for many thousand bodies here lay rotting in the sun. But things like that, must be after a famous victory. He is telling even more atrocities that were done. They say that it was the entire huge piece of field, they all turned out into wastelands because there were thousands and thousands of bodies lying over there. Nobody was there to pick them up and to take them as their people or something, to offer particular, you can say, burial to them. But moreover, these dead bodies which lay over there, they were lying over there rotting in the sun. If you have a dead body lying, any corpse will rot. And moreover, if it is lying in the open sun, it will become even worse. The smell will be foul, it will be a strong stench in the entire area. Nobody can go there, nobody can do anything over there. And this was the scene over there in the entire land. It was just filled with, you can say, dead bodies lying everywhere, the parts, the bodies rotting, and everything becoming a foul smelling area. And this is, he says, but still it's nothing but the part of the such great victory. He cannot console his children with any particular soothing explanation, but only can say the same line which he has heard since ages. This shows the particular mindset of this old man. He is not even in the position or not even in the willingness to question this particular statement, that whatever is he saying, how is it you can say comprehensible. How can somebody comprehend this particular thing, that after all these things still it is a great victory? Next, great praise the Duke of Marlborough won, and our good Prince Eugene. Why, it was a very wicked thing, said little Wilhelmine. Nay, nay, my little girl, quoth he, it was a famous victory. So here it says, the old man says it was a great victory that was done by our particular Duke Marlborough, and he won a lot of praises for this, along with great and good Prince Eugene also. But the children are not ready to accept it, and they simply question him, how can this be called as, such wicked things be called as great victory, and why should they be praised for killing the innocent children, newborn babies, and the mothers, and many other thousands of men, and leaving them to rot in the fields? How can all these things be something for which a person be praised? But the old man says, no, my little girl, this is something which is a part of famous victory. He cannot still give a proper explanation to his young girl, and simply is asking her to understand that this is all because of the great victory. It always happens with such great victories. In that case, they should not be called as great victories. Yet he keeps on telling her, his granddaughter, that it was a great victory. Why and how, nobody knows, and neither he knows the way why it started, neither he knows what was the end, what was the outcome, what good came out of that battle. Yet he simply knows because everybody is saying, so he says it was a victory, great victory, and these are all the parts of a great victory. Lastly, we see, and everybody praised the Duke who this great fight did win. But what good came out of it at last, quoth little Peterkin. Why, that I cannot tell, said he, but it was a famous victory. So after all these things, he said that the Duke was praised for all this thing, putting up a great fight and then winning over it, and this great fight was won by him. So that is why he was also praised for all his administration, fighting skills, everything. While he was praising his Duke Marlborough, his grandson Peterkin again quotes that what was the, okay, it was a great victory, but tell me what was the good thing that came out of this great victory? What was the good thing that for which it was fought? The old man simply says, I cannot tell that because I don't know what was the good thing that came out of this particular victory or out of this particular war or battle. But he simply knows one thing, and that is everybody says that this was a famous victory, and that is why all these things are a part of a famous victory, and nobody can deny it, nobody can question it, nobody can explain it. And this is something which is like the only explanation the old man has for his grandchildren. Yet the grandchildren, their curiosity is not satisfied with this. They are still staying there insatiable. They want to know more about the reason why it started, what was the ending thing, what was the good that came out of this particular war, and why still after all that atrocities and death and destruction, how can we still call it as a great victory? So that shows the generation gap. While the old man have accepted whatever the people say, the younger generation is not at all going to accept just the words said by everyone. They want to question each and everything, and that is the same question the poet wants to pose to us, that what is the better or good thing that comes out of such wars. That's the end of the thing. With this, we come to the end of the module. I hope you have understood the poem, and in the next module, we'll try to do the question answers of this poem. So with this, we come to the end of the module. Thank you.